Ladies and gentlemen, gather around and behold the pint-sized Spanish charmer that once dreamed of taking on the world, armed with 1-cylinder, 12 inches, wheels, and more chrome than my uncle's barber chair. This is the PTV 250, a microcar so dapper it could have passed for a pocket-sized James Bond villain lair. Built not in bustling Madrid or sun-soaked Barcelona, but in humble Manresa, it looked like a Morris Minor got shrunk in the wash and still insisted on wearing a dinner jacket. Now, before we pop the tiny hood and uncover all 250 cubic centimeters of Iberian engineering glory, do me a favor, slap that subscribe button like you're trying to start a two-stroke on a cold Catalonian morning. Let's rewind to post-war Spain. It's 1956. Franco's regime is still going strong, and local industry is mostly rebuilding itself with whatever materials weren't welded into balconies or accordion gates. But three ambitious men, Perriman, Tacho, and Vila, decide they've had enough of scooters and seatbeltless donkeys. So, under the name Automoviles Utilitarios SA, they roll out the PTV 250, a two-seater microcar for people who like their commutes cheap and their vehicles roughly the size of a generous picnic basket. This wasn't just some rebadged German import with a Spanish accent. No, senor. Almost every component, from the tubular steel frame to the coach-built sheet metal body and the tiny 247cc engine, was made in Spain. That was rare at the time, when importing parts was more difficult than getting your uncle to shut up about olives. The car was offered in two flavors: the standard version with roll-up steel doors and windows for folks who like being dry, and a sport version that had no doors, no side windows, and a folding roof. Perfect if you enjoyed pretending you were driving a miniature speedboat down Las Ramblas. At its core, the PTV 250 was designed to be a step up from a Vespa, but a step down from a real car. It was ideal for students, city workers, young couples, or anyone who couldn't afford a Fiat, but still wanted to pick up a date without feeling like a pizza delivery guy. And for a moment, it worked. Roughly 5,000 were built from 1956 to 1961, making it Spain's fourth most produced microcar after the Biscooter, Goggomobil, and Isetta. 18 were even exported to Portugal. One was rumored to have ended up in America, where it was either misunderstood as a child's toy or praised as a minimalist sculpture. But then came the thunderous arrival of the Fiat 600 in 1957, Fiat's Latin twin with 4 seats, proper performance, and the backing of an entire national industrial strategy. The PTV, for all its charm, couldn't compete with the affordability and utility of the 600, and like many idealistic ventures before it, accordion bands, mullets, and political promises, the PTV was quietly retired in 1961. AUSA turned its focus to dumpers and forklifts, wisely choosing torque over twee. Underneath the hood, well, technically at the rear behind the seats, you'd find a 247cc air-cooled single-cylinder two-stroke engine. It had a bore and stroke of 66 by 72 millimeters and made about 11 to 13 horsepower at roughly 4,500 revolutions per minute. Sure, that's not enough to scare a shopping cart, but when your whole car weighs just 330 kilograms, that's around 727 pounds, it feels like a rocket. One source called it sprightly, which, in microcar terms, is the equivalent of being described as shredded at your high school reunion. All that modest fury was funneled through a 3-speed manual gearbox with reverse, connected via multi-disc clutch bathed in oil. Rear-wheel drive, of course, because front-wheel drive would have been too fancy, and besides, the engine sat right out back. The ride quality? Surprisingly plush, thanks to independent front suspension with coil springs and oil shocks, features that were practically unicorns in the world of microcars. At the rear, a panhard-style torsion bar setup kept things stable, paired with hydraulic dampers. Braking came courtesy of hydraulic drums on all 4 corners, and it rode on sturdy 12 inches, steel wheels with 412 tires, big enough that the car looked like a boot with a growth spurt. As for size, the wheelbase measured about 1,800 millimeters, 70.9 inches, while the full body stretched 2,950 millimeters long, 9 feet 8 inches, 1,320 millimeters, wide 4 feet 4 inches, and 1,250 millimeters tall, 4 feet 1 inch. In other words, small enough to park in your hallway, but roomy enough for 2 people and 1 grudgingly accepted third passenger. Yes, the bench seat was advertised as 2/3 because there was a tiny auxiliary spot in the middle, perfect for a child, a dog, or a briefcase filled with tapas. Top speed, around 75 kilometers per hour or 45 miles per hour, depending on your weight, wind direction, and whether or not you believed hard enough. And while no one was setting lap records, the PTV's good suspension and low center of gravity made it surprisingly agile. One owner claimed he once overtook a Renault Dauphine on a winding Catalan road, though this may have coincided with the Dauphine being parked. What made the PTV stand out wasn't speed, it was class. Chrome trim, 2-tone paint, a proper ignition system, and real car-like features gave it a certain dignity. The sport version, with its doorless body and folding roof, felt like a toy for grown-ups who vacationed near water. One RM Sotheby's listing compared it to a sophisticated dune buggy, which is like calling a hamster a surprisingly competent mountain guide. Now, how did the PTV stack up against its rivals? Compared to the Postwar Spain's other iconic microcar, it was a revelation. Where the Biscuiter looked like a sardine can with headlights, the PTV at least pretended to be a car. Against the Goggomobil and Isetta, it held its own in comfort and design. The Isetta was flashier, yes, but with its fridge door entrance and BMW badge, it was also more expensive. And once the Fiat 600 appeared, well, it was game over. With 4 seats, a bigger engine, and the weight of Fiat behind it, the Fiat 600 turned the microcar market into a gladiator pit where the PTV showed up wearing a bow tie and sandals. Still, few microcars can claim to have aged as gracefully. Restored examples now sparkle at shows and auctions. And it's not just nostalgia. These cars really were well built for their size and time. One famous anecdote recounts how Guillem Taco, one of the original designers, was so moved by a restored example that he signed a message directly onto the dashboard. There were even pickup versions. Yes, you heard that right. Between 1959 and 1961, AUSA built about 45 tiny PTV-based trucks, little haulers with micro payloads. They weren't fast, nor were they especially strong, but they helped the factory transition toward what it would become famous for: dumpers, forklifts, and other industrial vehicles. One prototype even had a front engine. It barely moved cargo, but planted the seed for a whole line of utility machines. So how much did a PTV cost back then? Between 44,500 and 55,000 Spanish pesetas during its production years. In 1956 United States dollars, that's roughly $1,125, equivalent to around $11,000 to $12,000 today when adjusted for inflation. In today's collector market, surviving examples command significantly more. The most expensive known sale was in February 2013 at RM Sotheby's. A beautifully restored 1959 PTV fetched $46,000. Another car at that same auction sold for $28,750. That's not peanuts unless we're talking about what the car could carry in its trunk. It never conquered the world. It never needed to. Its mission was to prove that Spanish industry could build something charming, competent, and genuinely useful. And it succeeded. So to all our wonderful sponsors, thank you once again. Without your support, we'd be forced to finance this show by trying to sell leftover 12 inches, tires as decorative clocks. And to everyone watching, may your engines stay cool, your paint stay shiny, and your dreams always fit into parking spaces no one else dares to use. Don't forget to subscribe, because here at Cool Ideas, we believe that even the smallest cars deserve a big story.